Welcome to Sambot X News podcast channel. Today we have a special deep dive into what the future holds for 2025 engineering graduates in India.
I'm Raj Patel.
And I'm Priya Shah. For those of you tuning in who might be, engineering students set to graduate in 2025, or perhaps parents, or maybe you're just generally interested in understanding the shifts in the Indian job market, well, this deep dive is specifically for you.
Yeah, we've been looking closely at recent reports and trends to try and get a real sense of what the employment landscape actually looks like.
Exactly. Our mission today isn't just to, skim the headlines. We want to really unpack the underlying realities facing this graduating cohort.
We're drawing from quite a detailed analysis looking at employment trends, salary expectations, the whole impact of artificial intelligence.
And also how different tiers of colleges are doing and the companies that recruit from them.
And, well, what immediately jumps out from the material we've examined is the significantly challenging environment awaiting these graduates. I mean, the analysis doesn't really mince words.
No, it paints a rather bleak outlook, as they put it.
Right. We're seeing widespread hiring freezes, a noticeable reduction in the number of freshers being hired compared to the, previous years.
And the global layoffs we keep hearing about, they're definitely impacting the job market here in India too, aren't they? Affecting the local sentiment.
Absolutely. It's not just about fewer openings overall either.
No, the information we went through also points to these very real anxieties around offers being rescinded.
Yeah, that rug being pulled out from under you, even after you thought you had a job secured, it's tough.
And even if a graduate does manage to land a position, the start date is often pushed back, delayed onboarding, leaves them in a kind of professional limbo.
Mm-hmm. And then once they do get onboarded, the report suggests the pressure to perform is, well, exceptionally high.
Intense performance pressure, right, with even new hires facing the possibility of, early termination.
So any initial optimism you might feel, it really has to contend with these quite serious ground realities.
Okay, so digging into the specifics of current employment trends, looking at 2024 and ahead to 2025, the picture gets even clearer, doesn't it?
It really does. We observed major Indian IT service companies actually experiencing a decline in their total headcount in the last financial year, FY24.
Which is pretty significant in itself.
Very. And what's quite striking is that for TCS, this was actually the first time their numbers have gone down since they were listed on the stock exchange.
Wow. That really signals a fundamental shift then.
It suggests a change in how these large service companies are scaling. For years, their model relied heavily on absorbing huge numbers of freshers.
Right, that was the pipeline.
Exactly. So this decline suggests they're either becoming more efficient, maybe relying more on automation, or perhaps their growth itself is just plateauing.
Which has huge ramifications for that traditional engineering job path.
Definitely.
And you mentioned some recent numbers. Even the net additions seem tiny.
Yeah, really minimal. In the most recent quarter, Q4 FY25, TCS added just 625 employees, Wipro only 614.
I mean, those numbers are just a drop in the ocean compared to their previous hiring volumes, right?
Precisely. The analysis emphasizes it barely compensates for the natural attrition, the people leaving anyway.
And if we connect this to the wider global picture, those continued layoffs from the big tech giants.
Right. Google, Microsoft, Meta, they're continuing into 2025. And that creates this pervasive sense of unease and instability.
Which undoubtedly has a ripple effect on hiring sentiment and decisions within the Indian IT sector, too.
No question.
It's interesting, though, because sometimes you see surveys suggesting a slight uptick in the intent to hire freshers.
Yeah, but the material we looked at really urges caution there. It highlights this stark contrast between that reported intent and the actual hiring numbers we're seeing.
Plus the widespread onboarding delays we mentioned.
And the very cautious, often quite guarded statements coming from company executives themselves.
So it makes you wonder if that reported intent is really translating into actual concrete offers on the table.
It's a fair question. And this naturally leads us to think about the salary realities for this 2025 graduating class.
Yeah, what's the situation there?
Well, it's true that graduates from the absolute top-tier institutions, your IITs and top NITs, might still see some high-potential salary packages being offered.
But the analysis we looked at makes it very clear that these are really the exceptions, not the rule.
Exactly. For the vast majority of engineering graduates, particularly those coming from Tier 2 and Tier 3 colleges, the more common scenario seems to be stagnant or, frankly, quite low starting salaries.
What kind of range are we talking about?
Generally in the range of, say, 3 to 5 lakh per annum, so 3 to 5 LPA.
And these are often for roles in the big service companies, right, where the pressure is high from the start.
That's typically the case, yes. High pressure, maybe limited growth in those initial roles.
It makes you wonder, beyond just cost pressures, could this also reflect a sort of perceived devaluation of certain skills, or maybe just an oversupply of graduates in some areas?
That's a really crucial question. And what's particularly telling about the current economic climate, the report mentions TCS actually delaying its annual salary hikes back in April 2025.
Really? They delayed the hikes?
Yeah, and they explicitly cited uncertainty as the primary reason.
Wow. When a major player like TCS does that, it really underscores the overall economic headwinds, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and it shows the direct impact on compensation for everyone, including these new graduates.
Okay, now the material also digs into the shifting demand for specific skills. All the talk about AI and machine learning.
Right, and on the surface you'd think, okay, high demand for AML, that's good news.
But there seems to be a disconnect.
Indeed. What's fascinating, or maybe worrying, is how this widely reported demand for cutting-edge skills can actually mask a shrinking number of entry-level opportunities.
Oh.
Well, companies are increasingly prioritizing hiring people who already have significant experience in these specialized domains.
So they want ready-made experts, not trainees.
Pretty much. Or, alternatively, they're using AI technologies themselves to automate tasks that freshers would have previously done.
Like what kind of tasks?
Things like basic code generation, some automated testing frameworks, areas where AI tools are getting pretty sophisticated.
So that reduces the need for junior engineers to handle those initial responsibilities.
Exactly. So while the demand for high-level EML expertise is definitely real, it just doesn't necessarily translate into a large volume of entry-level jobs for new graduates.
Which brings us to what the analysis we reviewed calls a pretty serious campus placement crisis. That sounds quite concerning.
It is. The material cites some rather staggering statistics. Large numbers of graduates leaving college without job offers, even from institutions that usually have good placement records.
Any specific numbers?
One survey mentioned suggests as many as 83% of engineering graduates are without job or internship offers right now. 83%.
Yeah, that's huge. And the big recruiters.
The large-scale mass recruiters, who've traditionally been a major source of jobs, they've significantly scaled back their hiring targets, slashed them in some cases.
And it seems it's even more complicated than just a lack of new offers, right? There's this backlog issue.
Oh, absolutely. The material mentions Wipro actually acknowledging they are still working to honor job offers they made as far back as 2 years ago.
2 years. That's an incredibly long time to wait.
It really is. It speaks volumes about potential overhiring during the boom years and the correction we're seeing now.
And are other companies doing similar things? Asking people to requalify?
Yeah, we saw reports about Zensar, for example, asking candidates who've been waiting for onboarding sometimes for ages to basically re-interview by taking new tests.
With no guarantee of a job even then.
Absolutely no guarantee. It just highlights the really precarious position many graduates find themselves in.
Let's shift focus a bit. How are these challenges hitting different tiers of engineering colleges in India? Are even the top ones immune?
No, not entirely. Even the most prestigious institutions, like the IITs and the top NITs, they're feeling the effects too.
In what way?
The analysis suggests we might see lower overall placement percentages compared to the boom years they experienced. Possibly fewer companies visiting campus for recruitment.
And fewer top offers, maybe.
Exactly. A reduction in both the number and, in some cases, maybe the value of those very top-tier salary packages.
So even if you're graduating from one of those elite institutions, the competition for the limited high-paying roles, quant finance, top product roles, it's become incredibly fierce.
Absolutely intense. It seems that traditional sense of security, that guaranteed placement you might associate with a top-tier degree, it's certainly diminished somewhat.
Okay, and what about the second and third tier colleges? The situation there sounds even tougher.
It's described as quite severe, yes. The mass recruiters who've historically absorbed a huge chunk of graduates from these places have drastically cut their fresher hiring.
And those onboarding delays we talked about, are they hitting these colleges harder?
It seems so. The material gives a concerning example. LTI-Mindtree reportedly hadn't even issued formal joining letters to students from the 2024 batch, months after their intended start date.
Months after. Wow, that leaves those graduates just waiting in total uncertainty.
Completely. unable to move forward with their careers.
And the salaries, if they do get an offer,
They tend to fall within that lower bracket we mentioned, typically 3.5 to 6 lakh per annum.
and mostly from the service companies.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Service-based IT companies where entry-level roles often mean high workloads, high pressure, and maybe limited opportunities for growth in cutting-edge areas.
And the analysis also mentioned people taking roles outside their engineering field.
Yes, that many graduates are finding themselves kind of compelled to accept jobs that aren't even directly related to their specific engineering disciplines, just to get employed.
The analysis used a stark word: desperation.
It did. Describing the trend among graduates from these colleges, clinging to delayed offers, taking any low-paying job, exploring shifts into non-technical fields.
Or facing prolonged unemployment. It's a really challenging picture.
And for the lesser-known or, bottom-tier engineering colleges, the prospects are painted as even more dismal.
How so?
The analysis suggests almost negligible recruiter turnout on their campuses. Alarmingly high rates of unemployability, too, with over half nationally lacking the specific skills the industry wants right now.
So for many from those institutions, the best outcome might be underemployment.
Often, yes. Underemployment in non-core low-wage jobs. The engineering dream can unfortunately turn into unemployment or just work completely irrelevant to their degree.
And at that level, worrying about specific tech stacks like Java or Python becomes kind of irrelevant.
Pretty much academic, yeah. Because the fundamental problem is just the lack of companies hiring at any meaningful scale from those places.
Okay, let's circle back to artificial intelligence. We touched on it, but let's delve deeper into its impact on this job market for new graduates. The analysis suggests it's playing a pretty big and mostly negative role at the entry level.
Yes, that's a key finding. AI is increasingly being adopted by companies, for efficiency and cost cutting.
Standard business reasons.
Right. But a direct consequence is reducing the need for large numbers of entry-level human employees. These sophisticated AI tools can now automate a range of tasks.
Tasks that new grads used to do.
Exactly. Things like aspects of software coding, testing procedures, basic data analysis. AI is getting better at those.
The analysis mentioned Microsoft restructuring, too.
It did. They aim to increase the ratio of experienced engineers to managers, which strongly implies, fewer junior-level or non-core coding roles available overall.
And it connects the global tech layoffs directly to this shift towards AI and automation.
Yes, it draws a clear line between those strategic shifts and the job cuts we're seeing.
So for students listening, even if they learn Python because it's linked to AI, that might not be enough.
Well, it's crucial to understand that while Python is important for AI, the overall reduction in entry-level hiring impacts opportunities across the board. Java, QA, everything.
Because AI is automating parts of those jobs too.
Right. AI is increasing capabilities in code generation, automated testing. It affects demand for junior engineers across different tech stacks.
So AI adoption across industries is leading to workforce restructuring.
And creating significantly fewer entry points for the 2025 batch. That seems to be the bottom line.
Okay. The analysis we've been discussing makes a clear distinction between the mass recruiters and the product companies. Let's look at the mass recruiters first. TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL, Cognizant. What's the picture there?
Well, the main trend is a huge contraction in fresher hiring compared to those peak pandemic boom years.
Oh, we saw the TCS numbers earlier. Down significantly.
Yeah, around 42,000 in FY25 versus over 103,000 in FY22. And remember, FY24 was a net decrease in headcount.
And their FY26 target is cautious, with delayed hikes.
Exactly. Very cautious.
And Wipro. Sounds similar.
Even tougher, maybe. Only around 10,000 hired in FY25, and like we said, still dealing with that 2-year backlog of unhonored offers.
And the top three combined saw a net headcount drop in FY24.
That's what the analysis indicates, yes. And Wipro's own CHRO basically admitted they overhired previously, saying they burnt our fingers, so they're being very cautious now for FY26.
Infosys seems a bit different, though, with those reports of firing freshers.
Yeah, that's a concerning twist. They announced plans to hire over 20,000 in FY26, but that comes right after firing hundreds of trainees.
For failing internal assessments.
Apparently so. Around 240 in April 2025, over 300 back in February. And these were often graduates who'd waited ages just to get onboarded.
Highlights that intense pressure again.
Absolutely. And cognizant.
Well, the analysis reminds us of their past issues with significant onboarding delays, and given the overall industry trends, it's highly likely their fresher intake for 2025 will also be considerably lower than peak years.
So those emphasis firings really just underscore the extreme performance scrutiny these new entrants face. Getting the offer is one thing. Keeping the job in this climate is another challenge entirely.
Okay, so if the mass recruiters are shrinking their intake, what about the product companies? The Googles, Microsofts, are they a safe haven?
The analysis says definitely not. Not for the average 2025 graduate anyway. These companies are also undergoing significant global layoffs, continuing through 2025.
So they're cutting staff too.
Yes. And their hiring processes are described as extremely selective. They're often targeting only the absolute top talent from the most elite institutions.
So realistically, they offer virtually no prospects for the vast majority of engineering graduates.
That seems to be the assessment, not a safety net for most.
The material also talks about the broader global and economic factors playing a big role here. The Indian IT sector's dependence on the U.S. and Europe.
Yes, that's a critical point. It makes the sector particularly vulnerable to economic shifts in those regions.
So fears of a U.S. slowdown, trade tensions, geopolitical instability.
All of it directly contributes. Reduced client spending, project cancellations, and then inevitably hiring freezes within Indian IT.
Didn't the TCS CEO mention this?
He did. Explicitly cited rising uncertainty impacting their business from March 2025 onwards.
And the service companies, they feel this impact immediately, right?
Yes, their model makes them very sensitive to these global factors, which directly translates into those hiring cuts and onboarding delays hitting the freshers hardest.
And explains the cautious outlook for FY26 across the board. It reflects that deep vulnerability.
Definitely.
So putting it all together, synthesizing all this, the analysis concludes that the difficulty level of actually getting a job for a 2025 grad is what? Brutal.
Exceptionally high is how it's put. Brutal, seemingly impenetrable for many.
Because of that fundamental clash, high graduate numbers meeting drastically reduced hiring.
Exactly, that core mismatch. The analysis just reiterates those key challenges we've covered. Massive hiring reductions, 50–70% or more in some cases.
The delayed onboarding, the rescinded offers potentially affecting thousands, according to one union estimate.
The performance-based firings of new hires, the persistent skills gap, the regional disparities in opportunities. It's a perfect storm, really.
Now, the analysis does offer some advice for students on preparation, but with a big caveat, right?
A very important caveat, yes. It emphasizes that while preparation is obviously necessary in this specific market, it offers absolutely no guarantee of landing a job.
So students need to prepare defensively, understanding that external factors might just override their efforts.
That's the idea. Approach it defensively, knowing that these large-scale factors are largely outside their control.
So the advice isn't some magic bullet, but more about prudent steps to maximize chances in a tough environment.
Exactly, like focusing on strong fundamentals, data structures, algorithms, plus developing skills in currently in-demand areas, Python, AML basics, cloud tech.
But tempering expectations. Skills alone might not be enough if companies just aren't hiring.
Precisely. Temper expectations. Possessing skills might not be sufficient when overall hiring is so contracted.
What else does it recommend? Internships.
Yes. Strongly recommends focusing intensely on converting any internships into pre-placement offers, PPOs. That seems a more reliable path right now.
And building an online presence. GitHub, LinkedIn.
Suggest having a GitHub to demonstrate skills, but realistically notes it might not overcome hiring freezes. Networking on LinkedIn is essential, but again, limited impact if companies aren't hiring at scale.
So the overall message seems to be apply broadly, expect rejection, have backup plans.
Pretty much. Apply very broadly, be mentally prepared for rejection because of the market, and definitely have contingency plans. Explore options outside core engineering too.
And a crucial point, don't rely solely on one offer, especially from companies known for delays.
Absolutely vital. Keep applying elsewhere, even after receiving an offer, because the certainty of actually joining can be quite precarious right now.
So in its concluding thoughts, the analysis really delivers a stark message, doesn't it?
Yes, a rather sobering one. The overall outlook for the 2025 graduating class of Indian engineers is painted as overwhelmingly pessimistic.
It summarizes that convergence of negative factors: global economic issues, industry restructuring due to AI and cost-cutting,
and that massive reduction in fresher hiring by the big IT service players, all creating an environment of scarcity, uncertainty, and intense pressure.
Highlighting the specific challenges graduates face, those onboarding delays, rescinded offers, potential termination, fierce competition.
Right. The ultimate takeaway seems to be that navigating this landscape requires immense resilience, very realistic expectations.
And perhaps a real willingness to explore alternative career paths because that traditional route for new engineers just seems severely compromised at the moment.
See you later. Don't forget to subscribe to Sandbag X News podcast channel and hit that bell icon.